Hello and welcome to Temple of Akasha, the home of embodied spirituality with me, Natasha. Today, I would like to discuss the differences between karmic energy, soulmate energy, and twin flame energy. What is really interesting is that when I sat down to write the notes for this video, I was recently inspired by a connection of my own to create this video. When I sat down to write the notes for it, I was initially coming from the vantage point of what's a karmic relationship and what's a soulmate relationship and what's a twin flame relationship. And what emerged almost as an awakening and illumination for myself, and hopefully for you too, is that we are referring to energy when we speak about soulmate dynamics, karmic dynamics, twin flame dynamics. We are trying to understand complex dances of energy and then translate them into human language and form. And the human innately wants to separate, categorize, make secular. The human innately wants to box things in neat and tidy packages, and that's not how energy works. And so rather than this just being another video where I say like, this is a karmic person and this is a soulmate person and this is your twin flame, love of your life person, I'm going to invite us all today to approach this subject of sort of soul dynamics and how they present in our physical world from the vantage point of energy. So instead of thinking about relationships being specifically karmic or specifically soulmate or specifically twin flame, can we open to the possibility that every connection holds potentially all of these energies? And can we just use the language that I'm using to point to today as a way of examining in our life, where is their karmic energy? Where is their soulmate energy? Where is their twin flame energy? Where is their attachment in some of my relationships? That's the most primary aspect of the relationship: attachment, need, codependency. That's the karmic stuff. Where do I have relationships that feel nourishing, nurturing, supportive, the soulmate kind of undertone that maybe I need to give more love and attention to because they are pillars in my life? Where do I feel, either in a person or experience, this deep, profound call to unify within my being? And can I be courageous enough to answer that call? This is not necessarily the take that I was going to have when I initially sat down to write the notes for this and record this video, but that is my mission and purpose in this life. It's to help us become more attuned to the realm of energy, which is truth. The energetic underpins the material. So instead of looking through the limited lenses of the human ego and saying like, that's a karmic person, bad, this is a soulmate, good, this is a twin flame, love of my life, can we expand beyond these limited, parameters and see that everything is energy? It's not clean cut, but having said that, we do also live in and experience a world of form where we do experience separation. And I want to honor that today by outlining in the form of relationships what karmic dynamics might look and feel like, what soulmate dynamics might look and feel like, and what a twin flame dynamic or dynamics might look and feel like. I also want to add that when I was writing the notes for this, I was kind of asking myself, why do we even care? Why do we search for these things? Why have you come to this video asking what a karmic is, what a soulmate is, what a twin flame is? I've been there myself, and I was really kind of investigating, why do we feel this need to know the labels and to know these definitions? And what came to me is that some of these connections and some experiences in all relationships can trigger us, can trigger pain, confusion, fear. And for the human, without wider awareness, we can get really lost in those very compelling emotional experiences. When we start to expand our horizons and look at our earthly experiences from the perspective of the soul's growth and learning, it can help us to become consciously aware of patterns and experiences from a different vantage point. And so that feels important today. While we are all part of a unified energetic field experiencing itself through the illusion of separation, we are also in form experiencing separation, and so it can be helpful when we're in very compelling, intense earthly experiences to have like a wider vantage point and to say like, okay, there is a deeper learning, there's a deeper lesson. This challenge is helping me to come more deeply into self-love, self-union. And when we come back to that level of knowing, doesn't necessarily make the earthly conditions more harmonious instantly, but it can bring a degree of peace. It can bring a degree of conviction in how we're going to move through these experiences, knowing that it is serving soul growth. So I hope this is a slightly different view to maybe something that you've experienced or been exposed to before. And I encourage us all to be open to the knowing that we're learning as we go on this journey of being in Earth School. And without further ado, let's dive in. Let's start with karmic energy. So I'm going to share some words that when I first was tapping into karmic energy or karmic relationships, these were the qualities of energy that came to me. So with the words that are on the screen now, I invite you to scan your life experience and to just notice what people, dynamics, or situations that you're in inspire these words within you or elicit the qualities of these words within you. So just starting to notice in your experience where there may be karmic influences in your relationships, rather than just flat out labeling someone karmic, because in the awakening communities that immediately elicits a sense that someone is wrong or bad or it's a negative relationship. Rather than, again, moving from these very limited parameters, can we just start to notice in our life experience or certain relationships, where are there karmic elements? And you'll see with the words I've used and that I've brought forward that there can be a sense within these relationships that don't always feel as harmonious. And we're going to get into the deeper layers of what a karmic dynamic and or karmic energy looks and feels like now. Now, acknowledging the nuances of energy and the fact that everything is a dynamic dance of all things, karmic relationships tend to be what I call teacher relationships. They are soul dynamics that we attract, create, or agree to prior to incarnating that serve to teach us specific lessons or to balance, settle, and clear certain karmic debts. Their primary purpose is to make us consciously aware of old karma, karma being needs, attachments, codependent tendencies, fear, places where we're still disempowered, anywhere basically that we are not embodying unconditional love. Those relationships are designed as little chambers to help us become aware of those patterns in usually very intense circumstances so that we can become aware of the patterns and move beyond them. So these dynamics are schooling us. These dynamics or energies are directly teaching us something we need to learn through the container or dynamic itself. And so the nature of a karmic dynamic or experience tends to be marked by a very intense energy. It tends to create a lot of volatility, either in the external circumstances with that person or experience, or within ourselves, or both. But what I've noticed over the years, having experienced karmic energies many times, is that they tend to inspire a lot of internal polarity and duality. So a karmic influence in your life will really have you feeling these fluctuations of highs and lows and really will pull you from pillar to post. What that's actually signaling is a lot of nervous system dysregulation. So these connections, because they do prod at deep wounding, they do prod at the places that we still need to bring unconditional love to, they tend to inspire a lot of triggers and they tend to school us through challenge and suffering, generally speaking. And so what you'll find is this nervous system dysregulation is coming from an imbalanced place. It's not coming from your truth. It's not coming from your sovereignty. It's not coming from self-love and unconditional love. It's coming from need and attachment. And when we're dealing with extreme energies like this, highs and lows, what form this will tend to come in is through, especially in a karmic situation, very intense attraction initially. And this is assuming that your karmic interaction is not already like a parent or a family member, that it's a relationship that's come into your field. It tends to be marked by very intense attraction, magnetism, or very intense familiarity very early on. And what I've realized is the stronger the attraction, the stronger the attachment. This is how polarity works. When there's strong magnetism, when there's strong need, right? So you meet someone, there's magnetism there, it's overwhelming. Perhaps it catalyzes a lot of Kundalini sexual energy, right? Because there's a lot of soul charge in it. When there's a lot of need and grasping, what it will show us is that need or that attraction, that magnetism that wants us to grasp for the other is directly proportionate to the amount of which we are bonded either to that person or to the karmic themes that they're teaching us. So this is really important to be aware of, because I've been there many times myself, and I'm sure many of you have too, where we've been in these soul dynamics that feel so dizzying and intoxicating for the human. But they are quickly kind of marked by periods of a lot of fluctuation, either a lot of internal dissonance or dysregulation, or external dissonance and dysregulation, where the circumstances are volatile, arguments, periods of separation coming together. They tend to be marked with that level of challenge, because they are trying to draw out whatever karmic theme or bond that we are clearing through that relationship. Now, I want to just mention at this point that a karmic relationship, as with any dynamic, can take any form. You can have karmic energy to clear with any person in your life. It could be parent, a family member, a friend, a lover, a colleague, a stranger in the street. We are part of a wider network of souls that prior to incarnating, we came in with agreements to help clear certain patterns so that we can come into sovereignty and inner union. Any person can be a teacher of karmic energy for you, and they are not necessarily bad for being those teachers for you. Again, when we're coming from a very binary way of thinking of good and bad, I attach to the good, I have aversion to pain or suffering, we miss the wider soul lessons. The people that inspire us to feel deep triggers and woundings are actually our greatest earth angels, because they're helping to purify us. So karmic connections are deeply purifying for the soul, and they are master teachers for us, because they're helping us to actually, through challenge and polarity, come into deeper levels of empowerment, sovereignty. The way they do that can be uncomfortable, but they are ultimately helping us at a soul level. And when we gain this perspective, it can be very empowering rather than feeling victimized by karmic circumstances. Now, we might categorize a specific relationship as a karmic relationship when we can sense that there are karmic threads, when there is bondage that needs to be cleared, balanced, and rectified between the two of you specifically. And this usually is karma that we've carried from other lives that we need to settle the debt for. So it could be anything, it could take any form, but generally speaking, karmic relationships are debt settling relationships. We either at a karmic level owe the other individual something, they owe us something, we owe each other something in terms of energy, in terms of moving from one polarity to the other to help us come to union. Generally, these relationships are serving us to clear our karma, to clear any bondage to the past, to clear anything that isn't unconditional love. And I will speak on karma in a separate video, because I've had some very interesting insights with regards to this. But the karma that they're helping us to become aware of is not only specific to our soul's journeys together, it's also helping us to become aware of karmic patterns that we've had from childhood and in other dynamics too. So they are both serving these souls in the dynamic to clear and balance personal karmic energy, but they're also serving us to clear anywhere else where that karmic thread, say it's codependency, is showing up in our lives in other areas too. These connections really teach us energetic mastery. Based on the words that I shared earlier, I was speaking about things like baggage, heaviness, volatility. A karmic relationship is giving us the opportunity to become masterful with energy, to become masterful at intuiting what feels genuinely right for us versus what's a trauma bond, versus what is wounding, versus what is wonky conditioning driving our relationships and how we interact with others. So a karmic relationship is a very intense, usually, experience of becoming masterful with energy, with duality, with shadow work, because when you're in a karmic dynamic, generally there'll be a lot of projection, there'll be a lot of kind of the triggering of these old wounds that can make it feel very messy energetically. And so with all of that mess kicked up, we are forced to get really, really clear and to hone in on what feels like truth for us, what feels like a solid and healthy boundary, what feels like it's need and attachment that's driving our connection to that person in that moment versus genuine love, genuine desire to connect from the level of the soul. So they do school us in how to become energetically masterful through duality, through extremes. So these are, again, wonderful teaching containers. The way that they come through can be challenging, and this is something that tends to differentiate them from soulmate energies or soulmate dynamics, because a karmic energy will tend to feel less easeful. That's not to say that there aren't periods of ease and harmony and love, because at the soul level there is only love. And when we see someone that carries a lot of karmic energy and they come to our field, we're still going to feel at some level the love, because that's the truth. But there are other things that we need to address within that dynamic, and that dynamic has come to teach us specifically. So soulmate relationships, as I'll speak about in the next section, tend to be characterized by more ease. Karmic relationships or energies tend to be characterized by less harmony, less ease, and they can feel challenging. And so this can show up in a number of ways. It can show up as a little container that arrives in your field quite suddenly with a lot of attraction and magnetism, a lot of like volatility and nervous system dysregulation, and a lot of like challenge. And then they can leave very, very quickly, sometimes a day, sometimes a week, sometimes a month, sometimes a year. I tend to find that karmic relationships that are really helping us to refine our consciousness at higher levels will be quick relationships. So it's almost like they've been brought into our field or magnetized in so that we can just get really clean energetically, really clean in our field, really clean with how we're moving through this life. They've come in to teach us something and then they leave. And that is more, again, a marker of a karmic rather than a soulmate, because they tend to be shorter term. However, karmic relationships can also be long-term relationships. So family dynamics, we can be born into families where there is a lot of karma between us and our parents or other individuals. And we can also, from perhaps a less evolved place in our consciousness, get into karmic relationships or even marriages and stay in them long-term. The thing with the karmic relationship is we're here to learn some lessons together. And then really, once the lessons have been learned, ideally we've developed enough energetic mastery and connection to our intuition to know when it's time to move on. But what I've noticed is that for the longer term karmic connections, of which there are many marriages and long-term partnerships established on karmic energy, there's so much bondage and codependency and fear that keeps these people enmeshed, that they stay long after the soul has done what it needs to do with that person. And I've heard this from many people who I've either had sessions with or people in my field when they've said, like, I knew this person wasn't right for me from like the second week and I stayed anyway. Or at some point I recognized that my dad wasn't serving me, and yet I kept showing up in our connection, and it kept hurting me. You know, we are really being asked in karmic connections to get clear on, like, what's the lesson that this relationship is schooling me in? Can I be courageous enough to learn the lessons, to close out these cycles? And then can I be honest enough to see, like, does this dynamic or this energy still serve me in my now moment, for where I am now, from this more clarified perspective? Or am I still holding on from a place of unresolved need, attachment, or wounding? Early on in my journey, in the karmic connections I had, when they ended, those endings would catalyze a lot of anger, a lot of pain, a lot of confusion. And really what was underpinning that kind of flurry of emotions was a deep sense of rejection, abandonment. And so the betrayal, even these karmic connections, especially in their endings, because the endings can tend to feel less amicable. They can be sudden. You know, that could be like someone ghosting you or blocking you or just dropping out of your reality or shouting and screaming at you and never speaking to you again. These can be some of the characteristics of karmic relationships. And to the part of us that, you know, does operate from the heart and unconditional love, that can be incredibly painful. And what it does is it illuminates all the core wounding, all the ways in which from the past we have felt abandoned, rejected, and it's giving us the opportunity to heal those aspects and their roots. And what I've found on my journey is I've had sort of 2 significant karmic connections in the last 6 months. The first one was really schooling me in how to integrate, like, firm boundaries, like warrior woman, protector, like fierce Kali energy. It was an insane initiation. Didn't end particularly well at the human level, but after the initial flurry of kind of abandonment and rejection and anger had cleared because that person just dropped out of my reality, I was able to come back to unconditional love for what they taught me really, really quickly. And with the last karmic connection I've been in, it was the same thing. It was nowhere near as intense. And that's maybe something to mention, that karmic connections don't always school us through very dramatic circumstances, but there can still be this underlying sense of misalignment, like we're not quite understanding each other, or there seems to be this wonky energy, there's a heaviness, there's some sense of like, oh, that we can't quite rectify. And so in this last connection, when it ended and the other person kind of, you know, vocalized that and ended it, and it was a fairly like healthy way of ending it, but it was still quite sudden and whatever, that initially there was an initial kind of bout of sadness, but what it was so beautiful in showing me is how much work I've done, because rather than feeling rejected, abandoned, or unworthy as a result of that connection ending, I felt deep peace. I felt just this resounding sense of, I know my worth and value. This connection ending is not in any way a mirror of my worth and value. It's in no way indicating that I'm unworthy. I respect and actually at a soul level love this person enough that they're honoring their truth, and that they have schooled me in like beautiful energy that I hadn't perhaps been integrating much before, and I feel at peace. And so the reason I want to share that is because early on in our journey, or when we still have a lot of kind of unresolved wounding, karmic relationships can really stir shit up for us, and they can really kick up the dust from the bottom of the pond. That's what they're designed to do. Later, the more unified we become in our consciousness, the more we return to like self-love, that actualization of who we are and embodied in knowing who we are, the karmic relationships won't have the same impact. They won't draw you from your center as much. The lessons may be more refined, more subtle. They may not be as dramatic. And you will more quickly be able to return to unconditional love for yourself and for the other. And that is really another beautiful lesson. These relationships can be incredibly powerful teachers of how to come back to the soul level of love through forgiveness. So if there's been hurt, if there has been betrayal or challenge in some way, they give us an opportunity to bring through radical levels of love and forgiveness, and to embody more of that heart energy that only knows love at the deepest level, and really expands us into more of who we are, but it comes generally through challenge or polarity. So the moral of the story with karmic relationships is learn the lesson and move on, so that you don't continue to repeat and attract and create the same karmic circumstances in various different forms. Next up, soulmate energy or soulmate connections. So as we did with the karmic energy, let's take a moment to examine some of the words that came to me when I was feeling into this energy of a soulmate. And I invite you again to scan your life, to scan your experience, and just notice who or what inspires this energy within you. Where do you feel a sense of ease in relationships, harmony in relationships, a mutual drive towards growth and love in your relationships? These relationships do carry, or these energies do carry a markedly different quality to the karmic. And so we're going to explore that now in more detail. But I do invite you to take a moment to just look at the words on the screen and to notice where is a more harmonious, perhaps long-term energy, or an energy that's conducive for long-term stability and safety and connection. Where is that present in your life? And taking a moment to thank that energy, being grateful for the fact that you have that person or that dynamic in your life, or those people, because your soulmates, as we will explore, are your pillars in your life, and they're here to help uplift you and inspire you and to gently help you rise into your power and potential. So soulmate relationships are much kinder and gentler teachers of empowerment and sovereignty, generally speaking. Again, there are nuances in energy. All relationships will carry some elements of the energies we're speaking about today, but generally speaking, soulmate connections are relationships that are designed and have been orchestrated at the soul level to help you feel uplifted in connection, to help you feel supported in connection. So unlike a karmic connection, which you're generally being schooled in through the relationship itself, so that relationship is schooling you karmically through the dynamic and the person you're experiencing or the people you're experiencing, soulmate energy tends to almost hold the space in your field so that you can have the resources, the support, and the nourishment needed to be schooled by life karmically. So maybe you're going through, like, you know, a divorce or losing your job or a massive change in your external life, and your soulmate connections will be the ones that help to fortify your field, that help you to remain buoyant. There is this beautiful exchange of energy in soulmate connections that doesn't feel burdened by resentment or karmic debt in the same way that maybe a karmic energy does. There's a much more sense of ease, and of the giving of receiving of energy is much more fluid, and it just feels much more easeful to be giving and receiving in these relationships. Now, I want to point out this point. A soulmate is not just an ideal romantic partner. We have, taken language like soulmate and then attached all sorts of connotations to it in mainstream society, right? When we think about soulmate, we may immediately think about like one person who's the ideal person, and they're going to be the love of our lives, and it's going to be so harmonious and blah, 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 blah. Like with a karmic energy or connection, soulmate connections can take many forms. We have many soulmates in our lives. Arguably everyone on some level is a soulmate, in the same way that arguably everyone on some level is a karmic. But the primary point of this energy is to be a stabilizing force in your life, to provide a sense of steadiness, harmony, ease, upliftment, whereas the karmic relationship schools through volatility, either internally or externally. What this energy cultivates within us and helps us access within is a sense of steadiness. So from a nervous system perspective, soulmate relationships tend to feel a lot more easeful for our nervous systems. There'll be a degree of safety, of trust, of harmony, of integrity in these connections, of respect, that allow for nervous system safety, for our nervous systems to feel more regulated in connection with these people. And that provides a foundation for us to begin to flourish, right? These qualities of like stability, safety, these are very masculine. So the soulmate connections provide containers of feeling held so that we can flourish in who we are, in our authentic expression, in our creativity, the feminine. So with all connections, we will be triggered because we're human. And so a soulmate connection or energy is not categorized by it being perfect or challenge free. But unlike a karmic connection or a karmic energy, which tends to school us, as I've said, through volatility, intensity, a soulmate connection will tend to school us more gently over longer periods of time, and will tend to learn many micro lessons during a soulmate connection, generally speaking, because they are more conducive to long-term connections, whether that's romantic or in our friendships or in our work relationships. We tend to be exposed to many lessons in these connections in a more gentle way over a longer period of time. Karmic connections tend to come in hot and heavy if they're not familial relationships, and they do so because they are here to catalyze rapid soul growth and awakening to a specific pattern or karmic circumstance that's been keeping us trapped in limitation and fear. A soulmate connection will have a sense of dependency to it. I don't mean dependency as in codependency, as in you can depend on that person. They are reliable, they are a source of security, there is enough trust and respect established in these connections that allows you to feel that they are dependable, that these are people that are in your life to support you, and they will do so in ways that are consistent, because there can be markers of inconsistent energy in karmic dynamics and karmic situations. Soulmate energy tends to be more consistent. It tends to be not necessarily, by the way, from a place of dependency or attachment, but just from that kind of soul level recognition of we've come here to be pillars for each other. We're going to support and serve each other. But the shadow of soulmate relationships is that they too can fall into codependent templates, and we can become so comfortable in soulmate connections because they are easeful, because they are harmonious to a degree, that we actually do not listen to the deeper calling of the soul for growth, for expansion, etc. So whereas the karmic dynamic or energy will school us in soul growth and learning in a very intense and kind of stark and in a way that's kind of obvious, soulmate connections can become so familiar that almost the opposite happens, where we deny soul growth, soul learning, soul expansion in favor of comfortability and complacency. And this was my relationship with my long-term ex-partner. It was such a beautiful, harmonious container for the vast majority of our time together. We learned a lot together. We supported each other. It was an energy that was just like very uplifting and beautiful for the most part, of course, with challenges too. But with these soulmate connections, there tends to be a sense of like, I love you, I want this connection, and so I'm willing to kind of move through conscious communication and do the inner work, and both parties are aligned with that so that you can come back to a place of harmony. But what I found in that connection, and so did my ex too, was that we'd reached a point in our connection where we could have easily been together for the rest of our lives. We could have grown old, 80 years old. We always had fun. We went shopping together and it was fun. We would sit down for hours in our living room and it was fun. Everything we did together was fun. But we used to call ourselves two peas in a pod because we were so comfortable with each other. We were so at ease with each other. It was like best friends, that it did not necessarily inspire us to dig deeper and to like do the deeper purification work that was needed, or to do the things that our souls were deeply calling us to do. So for example, he wanted to move to a city in the UK that I didn't want to move to. And when you're falling into codependent templates and you're falling into attachment in a soulmate connection, we can deny what the soul is asking of us. And so actually we can override our innate guidance in favor of the comfortability of the connection. And so to me, that's the kind of big shadow tendency of a soulmate connection. It can fall into codependent templates over time, especially because they can be more long-term. And it requires our discernment and an honesty, again, to recognize, like, is this connection in its current form still serving me? Does this connection or the way that we show up in relationship need to be evolved? Do we need to set different boundaries? Do we need to reprioritize? And how can I both honor my needs and also honor this connection? And that is really the kind of learning with all codependent templates and relationships. It's like learning to honor the self as well as honoring and nurturing the containers that feel nourishing in our lives. So generally speaking, when these connections end, they do so amicably or from a state of like mutual understanding. So generally, karmic connections or energies can be sudden in the way they appear and sudden in the way they leave, or they can be triggering in the way that they leave our lives. Soulmate connections, as a generalization, tend to feel more harmonious. There tends to be that soul level recognition of like, we've done what we came here to do together. Beautiful, good luck on your voyage forwards. And so, as I've said in this section, the beauty of a soulmate connection is that it feels nourishing. And if you have many soulmate connections in your life, or a few soulmate connections in your life, I encourage you to really nurture them, to thank them, to send gratitude to them, to just be aware, is there equal give and take? Are you showing up in the way that you can show up for these connections, because they do support you at a soul level? But ultimately, if you are starting to sense that maybe there is a stagnation or a complacency or a comfortability coming in this relationship, do you have the courage to honor that perhaps that relationship needs to either change form or end, or in some way kind of move forwards? And do you have the courage to move beyond these codependent templates of attachment and comfortability and complacency to honor whatever your soul is asking you to do? Because ultimately we've come into these lives to free ourselves of attachments. Attachments are anchored in need and lack. When we feel we don't have something, we feel we have things to lose, right? And so when we are in wholeness and in unity within ourselves, when things leave our lives, whether through the loss of, a relationship, a divorce, a death even, while there is of course a sadness, a grief, there's a process moved through by the human, at a deeper level there is peace, because we're not genuinely losing something. At the deepest level, we can never lose who we are. We can never gain who we are. We just are. We are divine love. We are divine awareness. The more clearing we do, the more we come back to that state of knowing, the less attachments we will have in our connections, and the more easeful it will be to dance with this flow of life of the people that come in and the people that flow out, and to trust this divine orchestration. And finally, it's the twin flame relationship, maybe the one that many of you have clicked on to find out more about. I have experienced twin flame energy. I was in what I feel was an energy of twin flame with another person for 5 years, and have been for 5 years, in and out of periods of separation. And as I'm sharing this with you, I am also bringing in a new vantage point for myself too. So again, we're all awakening together on this journey, because as I've shifted from this format being like a specific relationship, a specific type of person, what I'm realizing with twin flame is that, again, there has been huge amounts of conditioning and attachment layered onto the label of twin flame about it being one specific person, that it's a love relationship, that it's supposed to end with physical union. And for the sake of the perspective that we're taking today, which is the dance of energy, I want you to just dissolve any notions of those things for a moment and just stay open with me to the possibility, because I'm opening to this too, that twin flame is not about a specific person, but it is an energy that that person inspires within you. When I was channeling the notes for this, what came through was a twin flame is the person, generally speaking, rather than circumstance, the person who inspires your longing for divine union within yourself and in physical union. So they are your great awakener. They are the great illuminator to catalyze that soul level desire to unify the polarities, to unify masculine and feminine energies, to unify Shakti and Shiva, to raise the Kundalini and to come into self-actualization. These are master teacher relationships and energies. I do not believe everyone experiences twin flame energy in this life, because it's not hierarchical, but in terms of an evolutionary perspective, my sense and understanding is that it does take a degree of awareness to be able to be schooled in the way that twin flame schools you, because your soul has to be ready and cleared through enough karmic stuff to get to the point where you are ready to embody inner union. This is not a light, easy, or quick process. And it takes tremendous amounts of dedication to the self-work for that to be your primary place of orientation. Not everyone is going to want that in this life, right? You can look around your external reality and see that very clearly. Not everyone is driven to self-actualize. Not everyone is driven to come into unity. Not everyone is driven by the need to know themselves for personal development, to become more self-aware. Therefore, we can say that for those that are choosing not to become more conscious, they are not likely to experience twin flame energy in this life, because that's not the lesson that their soul is asking them to be schooled in at this time. There's no hierarchy in that. It's just every soul is on their own journey at different stages of the journey. We're all going in the same direction. We're all coming back to unconditional love and unifying in that in an embodied way, but we're all at different stages. What I feel about twin flame is that it takes the characteristics of the karmic relationship or energy, and it takes the energy and dynamic qualities of a soulmate, and it merges the two, and then you just chuck a whole load of like holy water on top, and that's twin flame energy. It is everything that I've mentioned in the karmic section. It is everything I've mentioned in the soulmate section. And then it's a whole other something or other that I'm not sure I can capture with words, but I'm going to do my best to point towards it with words. My experience of a twin flame dynamic is that you meet God through another person. And this is, to me, what distinguishes twin flame from narcissist, empathic, trauma bonded relationships, or any other relationship that has a lot of polarity and karma in it, because of course there's karma in this too. But what distinguishes it and what makes it markedly different at an embodied level, again, it's not something that you could point to very easily in the external. It has to be felt, which is why it's very difficult to communicate the nuances as twin flame to people that haven't experienced it. When you meet that other person in the external that mirrors twin flame energy back to you, I'm going to use my own experience as an example. I was sat in a waiting room. My twin flame was the practitioner at this point. When he walked into the room, there was maybe a second, 2 seconds, I don't know how long it was, time evaporated, when his presence alone, I didn't know his name, I had never met him before, I didn't know anything about him, when his presence, the frequency that he illuminated within me, right, that he mirrored back within me, was so profound that it was like I'd been living in darkness my entire life, like in a dark room with no windows, and the light of God just started shining on me. And it was so blinding, it was so stark, it was so contrasting, that I saw in a split second how much I'd been living in illusion, and I saw truth in that moment. When you have an experience like this, there's no going back. And this is why I'm saying that twin flame is not everyone's path, because there will be other experiences for other people that catalyze that level of remembrance. It doesn't need to come in this specific form. Twin flame is just one path of awakening and mastery. I've mentioned that in my other video about twin flame. I'll link it here or here. I don't know where the box is going to go. But I will link to that because I speak in detail about the true purpose of twin flame in that video. I'm not going to repeat myself here too much. But that connection is the catalyzing experience, relationship dynamic that drives you to seek union as your primary place of orientation. So before, there had been enough in consciousness where you were still engaging in this level of reality, this gross level of reality, and it was probably easy to get sucked into, like, you know, cul-de-sacs and dead ends, and to be kind of floating through and playing with or toying with soul growth and learning and self-actualization. When the twin energy comes in, if the twin energy comes in for you, it's the moment your soul says you are ready to remember the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. And it will be so strong that it will drive you. It will drive you forwards to inner union, whether you know that consciously or not. And so there are some people who enter a twin dynamic who resist it, right? They meet this person. It's the most profound experience of their lives. And it also then, in the light of illumination, triggers all of the shadow, the darkness, the fear. And some people choose to stay in that fear-based energy, and they don't choose the path of inner union and alchemy. They don't choose to unite their consciousness and become fully sovereign in this life and in this experience, and that is free will choice. The reason I've said at the beginning of this section is that I'm not sure whether twin flame is a person or an energy, or I pointed to that, is because when I first met my twin, there were all of the characteristics that I mentioned with the karmic stuff, right? There was the intense magnetism, but like times a billion, right? I've never experienced the need to physically and psychically and energetically unite and merge with another being as I have with this person. That strong desire, which showed up as sexual as well as emotional and spiritual, that strong desire and magnetism was absolutely directly proportionate to the amount of trauma, wounding, and attachment that I was still carrying. The more I've purified myself through this connection and through the polarity that I've been exposed to through this connection and the volatility, right, that I've had to neutralize, the less that magnetism is present. What is still present is the unconditional love for that other person. And when we say twin flame, what does that mean? It's the two poles of consciousness, right? The masculine and the feminine coming into unity. We can easily attach that to the person that inspires that desire within us. And I have absolutely attached to this person being the person I'm going to be with for a long time. I think it's probably hard not to when you have a connection like that in human form that inspires the divine within you, and you see the divine in them in a way that you've never seen it before. It's likely that you're going to get attached to a relationship in some kind or some form. But once you really come back to self-love and self-union, and that's your primary place of focus, the magnetism to the twin is not as strong. And at the end of my connection with my twin, at our last period where we've now been in separation, it seems clear that in this life, we've kind of chosen forking journeys, in that he has other commitments and priorities that feel like the most important to him at this moment that differ from mine. His desire for our union is overshadowed by other priorities in his life, which I respect. And he's decided, at least at this point, that a romantic union isn't a priority because of his other priorities. For me, union within myself and ideally shared with another is still priority. And so what I feel is that twin flame energy, which is mirrored back to you in a person, can only be mirrored back by someone that carries a harmonious frequency at the level of desire for union. So how do I explain that in simple terms? If everything is energy, I believe that twin flame is a resonant soul frequency that is shared between the two counterparts, that on some level the souls of both have decided that they are ready to come into inner union. And when one sees the other in the kind of external, that recognition of like, I want to unify is mirrored back. And then it's both, experienced through both and through the connection. However, free will is very real. The human ego structure can absolutely deny the desire to unify. And if an individual at the human level chooses to either stay in karmic situations or not to honor the highest calling because they're still, in fear to some degree, that's their free will choice. And so what I feel is that if that is the case, because timelines are so variable and they're so ever-changing and they're so fluid, I do feel that another person can come in with that same level and desire to unify and continue that process with you to, help you come to inner union and perhaps actually collapse that spiritual union into physical union with you. There is a lot of contention whether or not twin flame is one soul in two bodies, right? Or whether or not it's a harmonious soul frequency. Again, we're speaking about energy and to me, an intelligence that is so complex and vast that can we ever truly know and understand it in human terms? I'm certainly not going to sit here and say that I know all the answers. What is interesting is that I felt a split from my twin at a soul level fairly early on, and it was a sense that through his presence in my life there was an agony, a despair, a sorrow so deep of feeling separated, I thought initially from him, that it was, I think, the most agony I've ever felt in my life. It was this sense of deep mourning of separation. Much later in our dynamic, he shared that he'd started to feel the same, that he'd finally moved enough stuff in the way to touch on this sense of separation that he was experiencing. And initially I asked him, because he said, I feel the pain of separation. And I thought, oh, is it because we were in a relationship briefly and then we split? I was at that separation. He said, no, the original separation, I feel it. I feel the agony of it. I feel the tear, the split. And so there is definitely a shared understanding between those in a twin energy of the split, of separation. Now, what came to me as I was writing the notes for this is, what if it's not a split of the soul? What if that individual is mirroring back to you the split or the sense of separation from God? What if that individual is not mirroring back to you the individualization of the soul from them, but from source, from the original moment when we individuated as souls to come into form? From that process of individualization, we are experiencing the pain of separation, and the twin simply mirrors back that remembrance of that wound so we can clear it, because there is no separation between us and God. And so that's how we come into the deepest union within ourselves. We clear any notion of separation and we embody unconditional love, which is the nature of source in my experience. So that was something that's just come to me now. I'd be really curious to hear how that resonates. If you have a sense of twin flame, do you believe it's a person? Do you believe it's an energy? I've heard so many different experiences, people saying it is one person, you will unify, if it's not in this life, it'll be in the next life. I've heard that it is an energy that can, and it's a template of potential that can pass from one person to another. The longer I'm on this path, the more I realize that timelines are collapsing and being created, and there are infinite numbers of timelines available to us at any one moment, because that is the nature of the unified field of potential. Everything exists all at once. In every moment, our actions, choices, thoughts, intentions are paving the way for the timeline we're going to experience. It can change quickly. If we choose soul growth, one timeline is going to be more anchored in form. If we choose ego, that's going to anchor a different timeline in form. And so I suppose what I want to conclude with is that if you feel you're in a twin flame dynamic or energy, I would encourage you not to attach to the person, but recognize that they are inspiring a deep desire to unify within you that is very sacred, and that you have been initiated by your soul into the deepest path of awakening possible, in my opinion. And it's an honor to walk this path of choosing union, of coming into self-love, of choosing to be an embodiment of that, because that frequency is going to shift the earth like nothing else. That's a deep initiation that you have been invited into. And as I mentioned in my twin flame video that I've linked, and I'll put in the description box, the point is not to focus on the external other, but to really honor and become energetically masterful at how you're being schooled to embody all aspects of you and anchor all aspects of your soul and come into complete union within yourself. So the reason I said that these relationships are both karmic and soulmate-like is that you will experience the volatility, the extremes, the push-pull. That's why we go through periods of separation and coming together in these twin dynamics. We're schooled through intense polarity so that we can meet the deepest shadows and the depths of pain and wounding within us. We are also schooled on that soulmate aspect of very beautiful harmony. The more we alchemize the shadow aspects, the more harmony, peace, love emerges in these connections. And to me, someone that mirrors twin energy to you will mirror back the highest frequency of love that you've ever experienced. And so that frequency of love, once you've been exposed to it consciously, that is your potential to live from. And that's what the twin dynamic is driving you to do, to live in service to that frequency of love, to be an embodiment of that frequency of love. And the twin dynamic will be a container that, through polarity, through energetic mastery, schools you in all the ways in which you're not in self-love, that you are still moving from shadow or karma, and to become pure in your consciousness so that you can be an embodiment of unconditional love and ultimately be a bridge between spirit and matter. So I feel like if you want to understand more about the depths of the twin flame connection from my embodied experience, please watch that video. I feel like I touch on this dynamic in a lot more detail there. But ultimately, what I'm coming to the conclusion of is that twin flame is not even necessarily a specific person. It is simply an energy that may be carried in a person we meet at one moment that mirrors back this desire and need to unify within at a profound soul level. What an honor, right? If we experience that. And that once we alchemize, we may well, at a physical kind of romantic level, choose to then walk the path of union with someone that carries soulmate energy, or perhaps if the twin flame energy of someone that has the same desire to unify as us comes in, they may then come into our field and continue that process of, coming back to union if the original person that carried the twin flame template chooses not to honor it or chooses a different path for themselves. So this is probably a really long video. I haven't obviously begun the process of editing it, but I think it needed to be, because I wanted to offer a different perspective. I didn't want this to be a churn and burn. Karmic is bad, soulmate is good. It's so much more nuanced than that. So I hope that this video serves you. I'm going to try and timestamp it so you can maybe go to the sections that feel most relevant to you. But I'm so grateful for your presence, for being here with me, for receiving this transmission. I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments. Whether what I've shared resonates for you, whether you have a different experience, especially with regards to twin flame. I'm still very curious about how it plays out in form and, how we really characterize this relationship. But as I said at the very beginning, and I will end with this, we are dealing with energy. We are dealing with the language of the soul that is beyond binaries. It's beyond labels. Can we ever truly know how profound and deep these connections are in the intricate way in which everything is connected? I don't believe so. I don't think we're actually supposed to know in human form. But what an honor it is to be in form, right? And to experience these connections and to come back to a state of being awake and conscious in a world that does want to keep us unconscious. And so whichever connection you are working with at the moment and maybe, drove you to seek this video, or whatever connections in your life inspire, deep learning, growth and awakening within you, let's take a moment to say thank you to those connections for being in our experience and helping us come back to our truth within. And I thank you for being with me on this journey. Take really good care, sending you lots of love, and I will connect with you again in the next video.